Okay, I don't have much time, so let's just get into this. Hmm. I hope this will take 1 hour. Himatsubushi, for you, the final mystery. Time-killing chapter. I now entrust you with all the mysteries hidden within Higurashi when they cry. However comical it may be, if you have reached any other conjecture, then you have passed. You have reached any... Oh, okay. This final novel is a meager reward for you. Conjecture is impossible. You have the right to reject this story. Hmm. This arc includes choices that were added in the console version. These choices result in dialogue choices that can lead to bad ends. Do you want to see these choices? Prompt choices and highlight correct answer. Hmm. Hello! Perfect timing. What do I click? Like, I know you said you didn't bother with it, right? But does it add anything? Like, does the, yeah. Does choices don't really change anything? They're just short what if situations if you get it wrong. Hmm. I don't even think they're canon, just for flavor. Hmm. We will prompt the choices and highlight the correct answers, because I think it'll be fun to see. Who's the criminal, you ask? Don't we search for them in the story? Who's the criminal, you ask? Do you even know what the criminal did? Who's the criminal? Who's the criminal who will kill me now? Frederica Birkenstall. Berncastel. Midsummer, 1985. I had misread the time and ended up arriving too early. The schedule board flipped with a series of clacks. My flight to Sapporo was a bit later on. I still had over an hour before boarding. Well, I might as well close my eyes for a bit on the bench over there then. I came here directly from work, so maybe the fatigue from that was making me sleepy. Finding a suitable bench, I put my luggage on the seat next to me and settled down. Akasaka. I sighed like an old man. I'd hoped to stay young forever, but had become splendidly middle-aged. Apparently the rumor that even people in the latter half of their 20s experienced a decline in their physical strength wasn't a lie. It had been mind-numbingly busy at work lately, so I rarely had time to do anything myself. This might have been the first time I'd been able to join a journey alone like this since I was a student. The reason behind this trip was to meet with an old friend. It was a bit strange to call him an old friend. In fact, it might be better to call him a bad one. After retiring a couple of years ago, he moved to Sapporo, his mother's hometown. His mother passed away soon after, and he was now peacefully enjoying his second lease on life. You'll find this interesting. I'm excited. I hope this does take an hour, because I really only have like 1 hour exactly, so... His name was Kuraudo Oishi. He was a former detective from the Primary Investigation Unit at the station in Okinomiya Prefecture. To be honest, the only direct content we ever had didn't last more than 3 days. I need to change the volume levels. It's way too loud. So this will be the first time meeting him in 7 years? 6 or 7 years? In other words, we met 7 years ago. In 1978. There's something I just had to ask, to talk to him about concerning that time. Wait, he said it was 1785? At the very beginning? Right now? So this is 3 years before... Oh, no. Wait. No. Wait, what did it say? What year did it say? I just, like, glanced over and thought it was 1775, but... Okay. To explain that, it was... But now, here, he said it's... 1978. Or, sorry, 1978, not 17, whatever. That kidnapping, the details and resolution of which were resigned to darkness. Also, it was impossible not to recall a certain mysterious girl. My name was Mamoru Akasaka. It was a year that had been strangely hot even though it was only June. Hey, Ruben! How are you doing? Early summer, 1978. Okay, so this is when he met Oishi. Yes, we are on chapter 4 now. The voices are too loud as well.
はい、さようなら。車に気をつけるんですよ。
How are you doing, Ruben?
お友達の家に寄り道なんかしないように。明日の教科書の準備は必ず寝る前にしておくんですよ。
Clatter, clatter, clatter. The lively sounds of children running towards the hallway.
でさ、
Yeah, I am well. I was telling Dianair that I hope this is a like fairly short segment, as I don't really have much time. You know, I have like exactly an hour, so I hope it's around that.
いらねえよ。
The unique high-pitched voice of youth, the energetic shrill of the cicadas were completely unheard by their ears. Children returning home from school split off one by one from their groups of friends as they went through intersections in the residential area. Even though there were several of them in a group as they left school, as they got closer to their homes, their numbers dwindled. That's why the fewer friends you were walking home with acted as an indicator that you were much closer than your destination.
じゃあな。会うわよ。うん。また明日ね。
What'd you think of Chapter 3's ending? It was very, like, wild. That entirety of Chapter 3 went, like, in a direction I did not expect at all. Like, I really don't believe that it's, like, Keiichi's doing, but maybe it is. Like, it feels so aligned, it has to be his doing, but something just feels wrong. Like, he's not the one that actually caused them to die. It was just a series of, like, freak accidents. But because the fact that he said he wished himself to die and then didn't die immediately, you know? I find that very weird. But the thing to me that's just so strange was telling the guy to drown, and then he did drown eventually. It was 15 years later, but I don't know. He finally parted ways with his last friend. The van was parked at a bend in the road. The window was open, the sound of the radio leaking outside. It must have been the news or something.
たため、道路交通法違反、公務執行妨害で3名を逮捕しました。一連のひなみ沢ダム建設反対をめぐる
Okay,
運動
so
は、
it is the dam. I was
先月
thinking
の
that
機
it,
動隊との流
it
血
could
事
have been
件
the
を境
dam.
に、過激化の一途をたどっており、
And it was 5 years after, so, and it's not currently 1983. So yes, this is the first. Oh, I wonder if this is when the first. Let's see, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82. No. So next year is when the first murder happens. Or the first incident happened or whatever.
警察では過激な活動家による次の事件を警戒しています。先週も建設省庁舎前での犬飼建設大臣への直訴事件があったばかりで、
Okay, the boy's ears perked up at the mention of the name Inukai. At that moment, a man's face peeked out suddenly from the window of the van. Am I on drugs and misremembering its arc of the series? It was really crazy. Like, from the very beginning with Satoko and the abuse and all that, it was, from the very beginning, it was wild. And even the very first, like segment, you know, it was just, like, a pleasant segment. You know, it was just a nice opening. His behavior was a little different than that of a man looking around to see if there was any incoming traffic before he opened the door of his vehicle. His eyes meeting suddenly with the unfamiliar man, the boy panicked slightly.
ウグイス OK。
ひばり OK。前後2ブロック確保した。いいぞ。
The man in the passenger seat whispered quietly. Nodding in acknowledgement, the man opened the door and stood before the boy.
君、犬飼俊樹君？
While asking that, the man peered at the boy's name tag. Toshiki Inukai. The name was plainly written on there. Okay, so what is happening right now? I'm kind of confused. The phone rang for a third time. So, okay. Yes, you'll figure it out. Yeah, no, I'm just trying to like understand what exactly is happening right now. So, okay, we took a plane. Um. Oh no, okay. It was the other and strangely hot, even though it was only June. So this is okay. So this is in the past when he met Oishi. Okay, young boy. Then okay. And then it's just giving us context on the dam protests. Okay. If he reached out, he could easily pick up the receiver. However, he was concerned that if he picked it up before it had even finished ringing once, whoever on the other end of the line would think him a fairly cheap person. That's why he normally never picked up the phone until the third ring. Even he thought it was a worthless habit. However, his thinking that there isn't much meaning in waiting just for 3 rings, when waiting for 5 be alright, was very much a reality. His mind filled with such trifling thoughts, he picked up the phone after the third ring had finished, its reverb dampened by his actions.
はい。もしもし。もしもし。
He knew that sometimes due to a malfunction at the switchboard, calls didn't connect well. At those times, it was best to hang up and let the person on the other end call again. Thinking that, the moment he began to hang up the phone, he sensed that it was definitely connected after all. He felt the presence of the person on the other end of the line, keeping
も
silence.
しもし。
There was no way they didn't hear his question. What was the meaning of this? It wasn't like he didn't know that people could use silent calls to harass others. However, he'd never received a call like that until today. Maybe he was just lucky before, but he didn't believe that he would receive such a call on this phone. There are no direct calls to or from this line. Everything had to go through an operator. Therefore, there was absolutely no way the call would be connected unless it was verified there was somebody else on the other end of the line. That's why he didn't understand how to deal with this silent call and instead settled into confusion.
あんた、誰だか知らないが、用がないなら切るよ。また、かけ直してください。
Isn't it a thing in Japan that silent phone calls are like a threat? I feel like that's a cultural thing. That if you like call someone and it's a silent phone call, it's like you're making a threat to someone. Intending that to be a parting line, he made to slam down the receiver. It was at that moment, it was the person on the other end spoke for the first time.
あなたが名乗ってくれないから困ってんですよ。あんたが犬飼大臣じゃないなら、さっさと電話を切ってください。
He couldn't help but be surprised by the extremely strange voice on the other end of the line. Was there a human alive who could speak with this hoarse and metallic voice? No, this was a voice he had heard somewhere. This was the kind of voice that was on those low-brow documentaries that they'd use when they wanted to hide the identity of a speaker, wasn't it? The voice he was hearing over the line was exactly like
あん
that.
た、誰？
だから、それはこっちが聞いてるんですよ。あんた、犬飼大臣じゃないの？
He, Inukai, hesitated to answer. Unable to discern the intent of the suspicious phone call, he had a vague feeling that something was off. He thought about hanging up the phone and asking the operator who initiated the call, or he forced himself to restrain that urge, and for the time being chose to state his name and
そ
listen.
うです。犬飼です。名乗りましたよ。
私の名前なんてどうでもいいんです。まず、あなたがどういう立場に置かれているか。あなたは今、自分の席で電話をしていますね。では、あなたの席の右側の一番下の引き出しを開けてみてください。
The lowest drawer to the right of the minister's chair. There was a lock on it, not enough to function as a safe, but nevertheless it was a drawer that contained some valuable things. That's why Inukai thought the person wanted some of the important information contained within that
すま
drawer.
んが、開けるつもりはないよ。自分の名前も名乗れんやつの、言いなりになる言われはない。
引き出しを開けてくれないなら、この電話を切ります。きっと、後悔することになりますよ。まずは引き出しを開けてから考えてもいいんじゃないですか？
Inukai didn't like following orders from this suspicious person one bit. However, he was concerned about what the man said about regretting it, so he decided to open the drawer. He took the small key he kept stowed in his wallet and unlocked the drawer. His hand stopped right before he opened it. What if there was a bomb inside and it would explode if the drawer was opened? That delusion took hold of him. He quelled that instinct and opened it.
開けてくれましたか？そこにあるものが何かわかりますよね。
これはどういうことだ？おい、
どういうことか説明する必要なんかないですよね。時間を差し上げますので、少しお考えください。また後ほどこちらから連絡いたします。それでは失礼。
おい、待て。もしもし、 もしもし
The call had already ended. That would not change no matter how much he yelled at it. Even still, Inukai, without realizing that, continued yelling into the receiver for a while. The drawer was still open. On top of the folders crammed to the drawer, it lay there. Toshiki Inukai. Written in plain lettering on a grade schooler's name tag, just lying there. Enshrined there, completely out of place, as if it were cowering. Okay, so the kid, after school, got kidnapped. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons or organizations is entirely coincidental. Okay. Do you remember, Yukie? This picture. This is where I first proposed to you. That brief moment before you nodded back, you probably wouldn't know how much it seemed like an eternity to me. Yes, I would have never thought that amount of time could feel like an eternity. Compared to how long I had to wait for you to propose to me, it was... From the moment I met you until today. Compared to the time I've spent since I was born, it might only be a brief period, but they're definitely precious, beautiful days that deserve to be called an eternity. That time continues even now. From now on, I wonder if it'll be a boy or maybe a girl. Either one is fine. Boy or girl, either way, it's living proof that we love each other. If it's a boy, we'll name it after you, Mamoru. If it's a girl, we'll put the Yuki from my name in hers. Maybe quite a refreshing change. We'll see. We'll see. And I know Chapter 5 is Shion as well. I don't know if Chapter 6 is Shion as well. Because the fact that Keiichi has a model in Chapter 6. It has Keiichi's face. I wonder if it's Shion up until the end. I don't know. We'll see. Thinking about names is so fun that in the end, we still haven't decided yet. There's still time to puzzle over it. Not that long of a time, actually. You see, Yuki, there's something I have to apologize for today. It's about your job. Sorry, it looks like an annoying bit of work has come up. In the worst case, I might not be there for the delivery. It's fine. You have a very important job. What you do protects the way we live. Compared to you, it's nothing. Please, go ahead. When you return, I'll be waiting here. With our child. Thank you. Also, I'm sorry. Please don't apologize. If you feel guilty about it, then you can just atone. If I atone that much, then no matter how much money I have, it won't be enough. It's a joke. Now, go on. As I left the room, I bumped into an elderly man. It was Yukie's father. In other words, my father-in-law.
お父さん、邪魔する気はなかったからな。廊下で待たせてもらったよ。
Okay, I don't know why it lagged like that.
聞き耳を立てるつもりはなかったが。生きたまえ、幸恵はああいう娘だ。何があっても自分が君の枷になることを望むまい。
私はこれまで幸恵に様々な犠牲を強いてきま
Okay, so
した。
is this in the past still?
出産という人生の節目にまで彼女に犠牲を強いることを。
君が本当にそう思うなら、仕事が終わったら幸恵のために時間を割きなさい。
Okay.
君が仕事を投げ出して付き添ってくれるよりも、そうした方がきっと幸恵も喜ぶだろう。
ありがとうございます。
君がとても大切な仕事をしていることは、
Okay, because
私も
he's like
よく
part of
知ってい
the
る。
detective
自分の仕事を
type
誇りに思い
thing,
なさい。
so makes sense.
幸恵は君が見事難題を解決して凱旋するのを楽しみ。
はい。
Compared to the time when I first got here, the numbers on the fare meter had grown considerably. It seemed the modest time Yuki and I had spent together wasn't so modest from an objective point of view.
待たせてすみません。やってください。
いえいえ。では、参りますよ。
Driver. The taxi jerked as it changed gears to accelerate, soon burying the hospital my wife was in behind a throng of buildings. Okay, I just thought about it. I think the reason why Keiichi probably goes up in people's ranking might be because we don't actually hear his line of thinking. If we, like, a lot of times I get frustrated with Keiichi was because I would hear his line of thinking, and I would be like, Keiichi, what are you doing? But if you just see his actions and, like, don't see, you know, how he thinks or reaches those point of view, or reaches those actions, it might be, honestly, like, even if the actions are bad, just not seeing him thinking about it, or, like, not seeing the thoughts will probably help in him not being as bad. If it was to end up as a really troublesome ordeal, I probably wouldn't be returning for quite some time. To call a rookie like me, on top of that, one who's off duty, it seemed that the section chief was calling for all hands on deck. The veteran upper brass gathering on an emergency basis happened occasionally. This was the first time, though, that I experienced everybody gathering together like this. Whatever was happening, there was no doubt it was going to be something novel. Right when my wife was going to give birth, if I wanted to spend the time to curse my misfortunes, I'd be here all day. Even the virgin ginkgo trees lining the streets had always brightened my mood, seemed to lack some of their usual luster. Eventually, the government office came into view. Briefly holding my breath, I let the feelings of tension course through my body once again. I miss Keiichi's I'm a man energy. I don't. I had to remember the work I was doing was important, necessary, and difficult. I composed myself and sharpened my wit. Ready. Are you the man, Tuno? The man that Keiichi's referring to? I don't think so. I don't think I'm Keiichi's ideal form of man. Kasumigaseki, Tokyo, Metropolitan Police Station, Public Safety Division.
全員揃いました。赤坂くん、ブラインドを下ろしてくれる？
The blinds were usually closed when they needed to use the projector, or if the discussion was going to contain some particularly disturbing content. The blinds closed with a satisfying sound, darkening the interior of the room. Immediately, the inside of the room was completely drained of the pleasant morning atmosphere, leaving behind only the cold illumination of the fluorescent lighting. After the supervisor ensured that everyone was present, he nodded to the section chief once again. With everybody on edge of their seats, the chief stood up solemnly and began to give his report.
推定48時間前、建設大臣の孫にあたる建設省幹部の子息が誘拐された模様です。建設大臣は事態を穏便に済ませるため、警察へ通報せず要求に応じるものと思われます。
But he reported it to the police, though. It seemed that approximately 48... Yes! We just heard that! Why do you need to narrate this? The reason why it was phrased that way was because the person in question didn't admit it had happened.
大臣宅の通話を監視した結果、都外からと思われる不審な電話が数件確認されました。誘拐された子供は病気療養中となっているが、通院の形跡はなく、周辺での目撃例もなく、その他いくつかの理由から、事件発生は間違いないものと断定しました。
Okay. But how did people find out about this? Okay, yeah. Here they admitted the details that brought this incident to light. If you think about it a bit, that meant before this incident happened, Minister's residence had been under surveillance already. I won't use the words spied upon. Of course, there wouldn't have been court approval for this, and it would have been very hard to explain to ordinary citizens. However, it was quite an effective method to catch wind of incidents like this before they got worse. I'd like for you to understand that dealing with these cases before they become a problem is the job of the Public Safety Division. Okay, what's the next joke? Oh, other way. Why did the cat paint a picture of his feet? Because it was a self-portrait. Oh my gosh. Wow. What amazing jokes there are. It's true that Keiichi's perception of masculinity is a problem. So far, we've seen how it negatively affected the last two. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna make a giant compilation of these jokes. I'm not making these. I'm just reading them off of the flashcards.
犯人グループは誘拐初期に自分たちが大臣の生活をかなり高度に監視していることを警告し、大臣が屈服し、警察への通報も思いとどまるほどの何かですね。
Probably gonna be an hour or so of just the jokes. That would be crazy if that was the case.
警察へ通報してもすぐにわかるぞって？
大臣の近辺に内通者がいる可能性か。
Several of the higher-ranking members who seem to have experience with this kind of thing let out deep sighs.
犯人グループの目的が要求にあるのか、事件そのものにあるのかは不
We're
明
watching
です
Angel Beats for the first time in 8 years. Yeah! Angel Beats is great.
いずれにせよ、国益を脅かす事態に発展する可能性が極めて高い。
Police politics. They really go in depth in everything in this game. If their goal was to simply have their demands met for monetary gain, that would have been nice. Or if this was some politically motivated shakeup, things would get a lot more complicated.
被害者の協力がないということは、脅迫内容も要求も一切不明ということか。
I think the most anime I watched was either... There were two time periods. Early high school and early uni, like first year uni. Or no, second year uni, yeah. Those are the two time periods where I watched a lot of anime.
本件は内通者の水準がかなり高いと思われるため、当室のみの極秘捜査とします。また本件は本日より最優先事項となり、これまでの通常業務を一時凍結して対応します。
But Angel Beats was something that I was recommended a lot, and I did watch it, and I did enjoy it a lot. After that, the supervisor continued on, tactfully explaining our course of action. If this incident were to become public, it's possible that the minister's political life would be over. I'll spare you the explanation on how the rest of the dominoes would fall, but in the end, support in the diet would decline. It's a visual novel too. Oh. How come you chose not to read the visual novel then? Followed by a no confidence vote and a snap election. And it might even expand communist influences. In other words, we wanted to handle this delicately.
川崎と佐伯は大臣宅子供宅の通話を24時間監視。大臣の動向を探れ。
It was supposed to be a full visual novel series, but only the first part did. Okay, the anime gave it an ending.
動きがあるたびに逐一報告せよ。
I see. Why they stop after one?
残る各職員は担当団体ごとに本件との関連を調査。最近動きが不穏な特殊ラインは集中的にやれ。それから外国勢力も水を漏らすな。
I've experienced one or two unamicable situations before. This, however, was the first time I'd seen things get so hectic. Several sophisticated conversations were progressing without the involvement of a rookie like me. I didn't intend to be timid, but I couldn't hide my confusion at this unfamiliar situation.
では、書き打ちに行ってくれ。で、赤坂君は...
I snapped back to alertness upon hearing my name called.
はい。
赤坂君は、大臣に陳情してきた環境保護団体関連を調査してくれ。
Oh wait, this is the minister whose child got kidnapped on the dam project. I just realized. And then I think they said nothing ended up happening with the child, but there was something that happened. Like nothing happened with the child, but something happened.
中でも、新聞でも騒ぎになってるひなみ沢ダム建設反対の団体をよく調査すること。住民団体の仕業とは到底思えないが、すべての可能性を潰していかなくてはならない。
わかりました。ひなみ沢ダム。
直接現地へ行った方がいいだろう。
I know, it's like supposed to be some giant project, seemingly like a full chapter series like Higurashi. It's also like 20 hours. I don't want to bother. Okay, fair. It's interesting to see. Yeah, definitely.
現地県警で情報を取れ。
It definitely is a... Well,
向こうの公安でもマークしてる
we
ら
haven't
しい
seen much of his thoughts, yet, so... We'll see how it's like. All we've seen so far with his thoughts are basically about his wife giving birth and this year.
わかりました。
At least I
現
haven't
地へ出航
seen.
します。
奥さん、出産控えてるんだって？こんなタイミングで申し訳ないけど、協力頼むよ。
Yeah, where's Keiichi Maebara when we
人
need
海
him?
戦術で総当たりで行くしかないんだ。
ええ、わかってます。家内も、自分の都合が私の仕事に触ることを嫌いますから。
すまん。ありがとう。それから、川崎くん、佐伯くん、君たちの応援には、
I didn't want to take a business trip when my wife was about to give birth. Even if I was a little busy, as long as I was in Tokyo, I could head to the hospital right away. Also, I wanted to say, there was Satoko's thing in chapter 3 where it's just like, I've never seen her make a face like this. But it just looked like a normal face. Like she was just getting mad. That was just like a typical mad face. So it seems like she was not possessed or anything. Even so, I knew the work I was doing was important, and I fully understood that I was in no position to be so selfish. I'd have to make it up to my wife for having to be away at such an important time. My wife, Yukie, would probably forgive me with a smile. The only thing she could hate doing would be holding me back. My male ego... Though at least wish she would try to have stopped me. Sorry, Yukie. I don't mind if you always complain to our child that their father couldn't come to the hospital when they were born because he was too busy with work. The next day I took the bullet train to Nagoya, and from there transferred to that prefecture. Getting to my destination by land took several hours. If I was traveling by air in that amount of time, I could probably get as far as Hong Kong. That prefecture was by no means close. Never sat in first class except for work, but whenever I did, the seat seemed stiff. Closing my eyes, I mentally reviewed the documents I read yesterday. The group under investigation, the Onigafuchi Guardians. They were a group of residents opposed to the development proposed under the Hinamizawa Dam project. The local protests were quite heated and were getting more radicalized. Even limited to what was written in the newspapers, there was bloodshed that occurred during a clash with riot police, interference with the dam construction, too many to count. The number of petitions, sit-ins, and direct appeals to the relevant organizations were innumerable. As an extension of that, there were direct appeals to the Minister of Construction the other day.
これがそもそも、今回、この団体を調査することになったゆえんだ。
The land they lived on was going to be submerged. It was no wonder they would go into frenzy over it. Even given that, though, could they really be capable of doing something like this? Kidnapping the Minister of Construction's grandson in order to halt the project? From my take on it, I had serious doubts. The kidnapping plot was extremely sophisticated and complicated enough that it was believed there was some political backing. This wasn't something that could be pulled off by some group of local protesters. Well, just like the chief said, the plan was to eliminate all possibilities. When I'm in that police reference room taking my time investigating, the higher-ups in Tokyo would probably solve the case. Without my involvement entirely. Even if that was true, I couldn't regret being away from Tokyo while my wife was ready to give birth. This was work. There was really nothing that I could do. Ding dong. The announcement that we would be arriving at our destination soon snapped me back to wakefulness. Gogura, that prefecture. Prefectural Public Safety Division. And here we
鬼
are.
ヶ淵死守同盟。
ええ、地元ではかなり賑わせているようです。
The Prefectural Police Public Safety Department already had the documents and a cup of tea ready and waiting for me.
早い話がダム反対の住民運動なんですが、事実上水没地域の住民すべてが決起したと言っていいでしょうね。死守なんて古風な言い方が示す通り、相当の決意と覚悟を持った連中です。そこら辺の温和な住民団体とは一線を画すと思っていただいた方がいいですね。
The stack of papers I had prepared for me in the document room was by no means thin.
発足当初はごくごく平均的な住民運動だったんです。それがいつだかの流血事件を境に急にヒートアップしまして、今では暴力主義団体かそれに準じるくらいの過激な勢力に成長したと言えますね。
When the riots are happening. Violent organizations usually indicate ones that enforce their own ideology without regards to the democratic process. Breaking that down, many of these organizations held extreme left revolutionary ideologies. Considering that, I couldn't help but to be surprised that a citizens group would end up going this far. Radical citizens movements happen occasionally. It seemed, however, that this group was nothing as trifling as that. It seemed that I would have to reconsider exactly what this Onigafuchi Guardians was.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟が要求。つまり、ダム計画の撤回を求めるために行いうる活動範囲はどの程度でしょうか？
The kidnapping of the minister's grandson was classified. That meant, of course, I couldn't tell the prefectural department about it either.
ご存知の通り、先週あった犬飼建設大臣への直訴事件では、逮捕者も出ています。危険性は十分にありますね。
I skimmed over the list of the criminal records related to the Onigafuchi Guardians recorded in the documents. The contents were all violent, not giving me the barest hint of a feeling that these people were trying to uphold the law.
具体的に教えていただけますか？
The chief opened up a manila envelope, fished out several unorganized sheets, and spread them out on the desk.
建設現場への襲撃事件が最も多かったですね。初期の頃、電源コードの切断や錠前の鍵穴に石を詰める、投石による事務所の窓ガラス割り等の軽犯罪が頻発していました。
Of course, what really happened, first things were like demonstrations, sit-ins, and distribution of pamphlets. Lively, but democratic forms of protests. However, then demonstrators and police clashed, which started a riot, leading to numerous injuries and arrests. It was from then on that the Onigafuchi Guardians, like their name implies, began to take a more demonic form of resistance.
襲撃が度重なれば、地元警察による警備強化がなされるのでは？
それは警戒はしたでしょうね。でもあちらは地元ですから。闇に乗じて忍び込まれたらお手上げでしょう。
You might as well label the entire map of Hinamizawa village around the dam construction site enemy territory. No matter how alert the police were, the locals would just show them exactly how easy it was to sneak around.
警察が警備を固めてからは、むしろ挑発されたように過激化が進みました。ほら、この辺りからだいぶヒートアップしてるのがお分かりになります？
事務所の放火、建設重機の破壊工作。破壊？まさか爆弾でも？
いや、連中ですね。タンクに角砂糖を放り込むんですよ。あれやられたらエンジン焦げついちゃいますから。
Even in Japan, it seemed there had been people doing that to the vehicles of occupying forces right after the war. Compared to the misdemeanors like breaking windows, it was extremely violent and aggressive.
そこまでやられたら、地元警察の面目は丸つぶれですね。
放火はさすがにですね。それで地元警察が24時間体制の人員を大幅に増員しまして、それで建設現場への襲撃は一段落したようです。
Use the words quieted down, but that was still smack dab in the middle of the list of crimes.
で、連中ですね。現場への直接攻撃が難しくなったと知ったら、今度は個人攻撃に切り替えました。最初に狙われたのが工事事務所の現場作業者でした。
They didn't say what month it was right now, right? Because the Watsunagashi happens in June. But I don't think they said what month it was currently. After that, there was silence. What was being described to me was a guerrilla war fought in the jungle. Threats and violence against the workers. Harsh words and harsher rocks were thrown.
かなりの告訴がされているのに、逮捕者があまり出ていませんね。
そりゃそうです。第一、目撃者なんかいないんですから。それどころか、現行犯だったにしたって、アリバイがポンポンポンとできちゃうんです。
それはどういうことですか？
Everyone in the village going to cover for them?
例えばですね、あなたがひなみ沢で歩いていて、ある男にナイフで刺されたとします。あなたは相手をよく覚えていて、名前も住所も特定できてるとします。ただし、ナイフには指紋がなく、物的証拠だけがない。まあ、ありがちな傷害事件だと思うでしょ？でも、ひなみ沢じゃ完全犯罪なんです。
Really? Everybody is... entire village. They're all in on it. To protect the man who is the perpetrator, they'll get their story straight and prepare an alibi. To that end, they'll probably even forge some evidence.
裁判にもつれ込ますほかないわけですが、何しろ物的証拠はない上、犯人を隠匿する証言だけは後から増えていく。
But it didn't seem like that when Keiichi was there.
検察も書類送検には二の足を踏むわけです。殺人ならいざ知らず、 透析で額を切った、殴られてあざができた程度だと、仮に犯人を特定できたとしても、嫌疑不十分で送検されないことがほとんどです。
Every case is without a doubt perpetrated by someone in Hinamizawa, but they can't identify who. Even if they could figure out who it is, they're unable to obtain enough circumstantial evidence through due process. The villagers were all extremely well informed about this, and so the malicious, vicious, and tenacious personal attacks continued.
被害者はそれでは納得できないでしょう。検察審査会に再審請求を出さないのですか？
それはですね、審査員たちがみんな厄介ごとに巻き込まれたくないと思っているからですよ。ひなみざわ関係のトラブルには首を突っ込みたがらないんです。
The inquest committee is comprised of a random selection of local residents. In the event the prosecutor fails to get a conviction, they have the power to order a retrial. It's a system designed to assert the will of the people on the actions of expert prosecutors in the legal world. In this case, however, being comprised of local residents has backfired.
首を突っ込みたがらない。それはなぜです？
なんて説明すればいいんでしょう。恐れられているって言えばいいのかな。あそこはね、少し特殊なんです。
特殊？何か政治的なバックボーンが存在するということですか？
いえ、そういうのとは少し違うというか、怖がられていると思ってください。このあたりは口では少し説明しにくいんです。
So, it's interesting to get a different point of view on Hinamizawa, you know, like people talking about Hinamizawa. So, in their view, it's really difficult to actually get any conviction in Hinamizawa.
ああ、そうだ。わかりやすいのがありました。
So I wonder how Oishi sees them. Wiping his forehead with a handkerchief, he opened a file labeled as a list of members of the Onigafuchi Guardians.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の勢力にはですね、近隣の町々に強い影響力を持つ人間が多々おりまして、この辺をご覧いただけますか？
I looked. What I saw startled me. Prefectural and municipal assembly members, staff and members of the Chamber of Commerce, an executive of a business association, an executive of a town council association, and a PTA liaison. There are more than a few people with a lot of say both locally and in the neighboring regions.
この界隈では、ひなみ沢のダム反対運動は
Someone other
皆
than
静
Oishi
観して
too,
いる
yeah,
のが
yeah.
普通なんです。
Around here, you could pretty much expect your actions to be observed by those against the dam
ダムを
project.
肯定するような発言をすると、どこでどう巡って不利益を被るかわからない。何しろ近隣の町の喉元は、ひなみ沢出身の人間が抑えていますからね。
検察審査員のリストは非公開でしょう。報復がされないように何らかの措置が取られているはずでは。
一応非公開でプライバシーは守られてますがね。それを管理してるのは沖宮市役所の人間、つまり地元の人間なんです。守秘義務があるとはいえ、やはり人間のつながりは分かりませんからね。ひなみ沢の人間はそのあたりのつながりがことのほか強固ですから。
When you consider the obligations and duties people have to the region, the web of information thereby formed is nothing to scoff at. It's not uncommon for housewives in a neighborhood to know which kid from which house is what grade in which school, what subjects they're good at, and what vegetables they hate, among other things.
それにほら、ひなみ沢と遅延の深い暴力団組織がありましてね。これが今回の騒動に全面バックアップしてるらしいんです。こちらが出てくるのが一番効いてるみたいですね。
暴力団？ダムの建設反対で住民と一致？どういう利害が一致するのか読みがたいですね。
それは難しいことじゃないです。実はですね、この暴力団の組長がですね、ひなみ沢村の出身なんです。村の重鎮の一人の婿養子にあたりまして。
Exactly what was this Hinamizawa? I thought it was some desolate rustic village. However, for some reason, they exerted a strong influence on the surrounding areas and had a strong sense of unity. They would protect the village by any means necessary, even if that meant resorting to violence. The chief had said they were afraid because there were numerous influential people living there, but somehow I got the feeling that they were afraid of the village itself. There was something clearly different from what I read in the documents in Tokyo. This was no simple residential protest against the dam. For some reason, an uneasy feeling began to nestle itself at the back of my mind. I chose the most basic way to ask my question. In other words, I asked directly what I wanted to know.
室長、
This way, I want to check something.
これは例えば、仮の話ですが。
はい。
例えば、その鬼ヶ淵死守同盟がダム計画を頓挫させるため、要人を脅迫するようなことは考えられますか？
Okay, the chief replied immediately.
あり得るでしょう。事実、彼らは市役所や県庁、建設省の工事事務所にも押しかけ、恫喝まがいのことを
So
して
they
いま
don't
すし、
know about the kidnapping case then, I guess, yet.
工事関係者の家族が不審者につけ回されたという事件も起こっています。
Well, that would make sense. To halt progress on the dam, they've raided the construction site, destroying heavy machinery and lighting the construction office on fire. If they didn't have any qualms about doing that, threats and violence against people related to the dam would probably be no problem. But that was it. Even your everyday hoodlum could use threats and violence. However, this time it was the kidnapping of the minister's grandson, an abnormally high-level crime. Not only was pulling off the kidnapping difficult in the first place, but so was maneuvering to have the minister surrender their demands immediately. There was no way this was the work of amateurs. Do these people have the power to enact this large of a crime? That was the heart of the matter. Was the Onigafuchi Guardians an organization capable of pulling this off? In order to ask that question, once again, I chose the most basic method.
例えば、政府要人の関係
There's a
者を
Higurashi
誘
fan
拐して
game that's a Toho game, like a Toho-like game, or like a
なんてこ
bullet
とは
hell? Or
あり得ると思いま
do
す
you
か？
mean like a literal Toho game? There's no way they could pull off something that big. That was the answer I most hoped for. If it was that answer, my work was good as halfway done. Might be able to get back in time for my wife to give birth. That was how it was supposed to be. The chief, without a hint of hesitation, replied,
やるかもしれません。そこの知れない連中ですから。
Sorry, Yuki. Seemed like my work wouldn't end so simply after all.
おう、赤坂君か。ご苦労さん。担当地域での情報収集はどうですか？
順調です。これから現地警察の公安と接触できることになりましたの
It's not an official game, but just a bullet hell where you play as Keiichi like Sakuya or Reimu. Okay.
東京
Makes
の調査
sense.
の方はどうですか？
他の職員も順調に調査を進めているよ。でも調べる団体が星の数だからね。そんなに悠長に時間もかけられないし。
There were no new developments at this time. No matter how suspicious the Onigafuchi Guardians was, if they solved the case in Tokyo, my job was done. Looked like my wishful thinking wouldn't come to pass. Hanging up the phone, I let my gaze drift outside the window to the valley of unfamiliar buildings.
赤坂さん、今、お貸しできる車が戻ってきました。ご案内しますので、こちらへどうぞ。
あ、すみ
Are
ま
you
せ
gonna
ん。
play it, Dianeo? He showed me to the elevator to the underground parking lot where a battered sedan was waiting for me. That the steering wheel kept drifting to the left was a little concerning, but it would be enough to get me around for a while. My destination was Shishibone City, that prefecture, an area under the control of the Onigafuchi Guardians. The Okinomiya police station was right on the front lines. Okay. Okinomiya, that prefecture. Okinomiya Police Station. Shishibone City was, as far as provincial cities went, rather behind the times. Okinomiya, recessed in the mountains, was even more remote. With little change between the seasons, is Okinomiya an actual... in Japan? With little change between seasons, all that was left was the tepid passage of time. It made for a rather drab town. Some damn war drama, yep. It is crazy. It's nice to see the full context of everything. There are no tourist attractions or local delicacies without even a strong regional industry. It was simply dull. Just looking at the monotonous and peaceful townscape, it was hard to catch a glimpse of the radical resistance of the Onigafuchi Guardians. The atmosphere of boredom didn't hint of the Okinomiya police station being on the front lines of the damn conflict, nor of the numerous incidents that I had heard about at the prefectural headquarters.
おはようございます。違反金の納付ですか？
いえ、公安部の本田屋さんにアポイントがあります。赤坂とお伝えください。
失礼しました。少々お待ちください。
Yeah, why do you assume are you here to pay a fine? Like, is that a thing that people normally ask? The clerk, who thought I was here for a parking violation at first glance, after fumbling with the unfamiliar extension number, told the person on the line they had a visitor.
どうもどうも。赤坂さんでいらっしゃいますか？縁のはるばるお疲れ様でした。こんな部屋で申し訳ありませんね。議員さんが突然お越しになっちゃったんで追い出されちゃいまして。
I would hesitate to call where we were a conference room, as it was very small and cluttered. The cramped space was parked with lockers. I had the impression that it was more of a change room that doubled as one for smoking. Listening to his crude chortles, I didn't get much of a feeling that Hondaya, who was the head of the local public safety division, was much of an intellectual. But I knew that, in exchange, he had both experience and absolute confidence in his instincts.
ご多忙中、突然お邪魔して申し訳ありませんでした。警視庁から参りました。赤坂と申します。よろしくお願いします。
公安部の本田屋です。よろしくよろしく。県警防隊の3階部長から協力を惜しむなと脅されておりますので。
Sankai from the prefectural gangbusters? Is that like the chief in this previous thing?
防隊？
Okay.
県警の暴力団対策本部ですか？
うちじゃ鬼ヶ淵支主の連中は暴力団の延長に位置づけてますんでね。あれを善意の住民運動だなんてあんた、東城もいいとこですわ。
Dude, I do not like how this guy is laughing all the time. They said at the prefectural office, too, that the Onigafuchi Guardians was linked to the local mob. If I recall correctly, the adopted son of somebody influential was a lieutenant in that gang.
そりゃ逆。全然逆ですよ。暴力団の活動があって、それに住民団体が大義名分みたいにくっついていると、そういう風に考えてください。逆。
Ondaya was just about rolling with laughter. This was slightly different than the info given to me at the prefectural office, but somebody embedded locally would be more knowledgeable. Also, I think we'll give it 10 more minutes, and then I unfortunately will have to leave, and we'll have to leave off at whatever it's at. One of those individuals, noticing Hondaya's guffaws, came up to us.
何の話をしてるかと思えば。
おお、クラちゃん。ちょうどよかった。クラちゃんも入ってよ。こちら、はるばる東京の警視庁からお見えになった赤坂警部。
警部だなんて。まだまだ新米です。
Detective Delicious.
赤坂です。
Yeah.
よろしくお願いします。
Is this like Oishi's theme? What is this? Why is it?
初々しいのがいいですね。採用は今年ですか？
Okay, we've never heard this. It fits him. It does. I couldn't help but think I was being ridiculed, so I only responded with a forced smile. I could tell this new person was like Hondaya, the type who had confidence in their instincts and experience. I really didn't like those types of people.
赤坂さんにもご紹介します。こちらは刑事部の大石くん。赤坂さんがお問い合わせの S 号の件なら彼が詳しいです。
S 号？
園崎の S 号ってのはですね、園崎家が関連している件を示す、まあ暗号みたいなもんなんです。
Sonozaki? Come to think of it, I remember when I was poring over the documents at headquarters, there were quite a few people with the last name Sonozaki popping up.
確か園崎氏は鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の役員でしたね。確か会計だったと思います。
The two of them were surprised when I rattled off what post that Sonozaki held. After a moment, both of them erupted into laughter.
赤坂さんでしたっけ？あなたお勉強家さんですね。ひょっとして同盟の連中の主要人物 全部暗記してるんじゃ
暗記というほどではありませんが、一応鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の幹部リストは一読しました。
Yeah.
じゃあ会長と副会長は？
会長は現ひなみ沢村村長の君吉喜一郎氏、副会長は鳥海神社部長の古出氏、会計が園崎を領して、会計監査は牧野氏、教頭部長が君吉
Okay,
義郎
he's
氏、
just listing everything
広
off.
報部長が園崎貞夫氏。
赤坂さん、あなたなかなかやりますね。給料安いけどうちに来ません？うちに一番必要で一番いないタイプですよ。
Why is Oishi always looking to hire people? He's like, you want a job? You want a job? You want a job? To everyone. He's like single-handedly saving the job market.
で、ちなみに園崎貞夫は青年部長なんです。惜しいですね。広報部長は園崎忠孝。
Feeling like I wasn't being complimented at all, I started settling into an uncomfortable mood. However, I was becoming more and more aware that I was the weakest link in this investigation. So I just had to bear with it. I didn't mean for that feeling to show up on my face, but the crafty detectives didn't let that slip by.
バカにしたつもりはないんです。お詫びと言っちゃなんですが。なんでしたら村を実際にご案内しましょう。
For somebody with no feel for the area like me, it would be a great help. I couldn't have asked for more.
鬼ヶ淵死守同盟ってのは、結局、ひなみ沢村の対外的な別称に過ぎません。村を知ることが、あなたのお仕事の近道だと思いますよ。いかがです？
The residential movement, in other words, held influence over the whole region. So the leader of the movement was the leader of that influence. Just like that, the thought process in the region would become the overall personality of the movement. Just like Oishi had said, in order to learn what they were really like, this regional force behind the dam protests, getting to know the villagers, was the quickest way.
よろしくお願いします。
Nodding back without skipping a beat, Oishi laughed in satisfaction and stood up. If I took the information I learned at the prefectural office and from Hondaya to heart, if my position was exposed, my personal safety was at risk. The opponent was an extremist group that had no qualms about using threats or violence against somebody. If my personal info was leaked, it wouldn't be hard to imagine that I'd be in danger, whether the job or not. Thinking that, I felt a little nervous.
連中は顔覚えるの早いですからね。私と一緒にいるところを見られると多分いろいろあなたのお仕事に差し支えると思います。
So I said everyone hates Oishi. Why does everyone hate Oishi?
月並みですがね。こいつを身につけておいてください。
I remember before they were saying that Oishi is like the what was it? Oyashiro-sama's servant or something? Oishi handed me an incredibly suspicious disguise comprised of a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a mask. I didn't want to get all hot and stuffy, but Oishi's warning was probably right on the money. Considering that, I put them on with appreciation. Looking so suspicious that Oishi had to smile wryly.
どこまで話しましたかね。
御三家という旧家が村を支配しているというところまでです。
The Onigafuchi Guardians was the same as the village of Hinomizo itself. Oyashiro-sama's servant, okay. So I wonder how, like, I feel like he was hated before that as well. Meaning there was a direct correlation between being an executive in the alliance and being a leader in the village. As Hondaya had told me a short time ago. If the village was ruled by 3 ancient families, then it would mean the Onigafuchi Guardians was ruled by those same 3 families.
県警の資料には何て書いてありました？死守同盟のリーダー格とかそういうことについて。
Documents I was using were classified. If I responded to Oishi's question, it would be a breach of security. However, most likely, this man I judged was more well versed in the situation than any of the documents at the prefectural police department. So I decided to answer him.
同盟の会長は現村長の君吉喜一郎と。
Oishi, upon hearing that, let out a small chuckle. For him to ask that and to laugh at the answer as it was recorded in the documents meant that it wasn't the case in reality.
君吉氏以外の影の人物がいる。県警の持つ、いや、一般的な情報とは異なり。
君吉のじいさんなんてただのお飾りですよ。そもそもこの村じゃ村長なんてポスト自体も形式だけなんです。
つまり同盟も村も本当の意味で支配している別の、それが先ほどおっしゃられていた御三家。
まあそのあたりはこれからご説明します。
All of a sudden, with a thunk, the car suddenly lurched. The paved road given way to a gravel one. At the same time, the scenery outside the window changed. The Hinamizawa Dam project must be withdrawn. Overthrow the shameless puppet of a governor. The dam will submerge the natural beauty of Hinamizawa. Protect the village from the unethical dam. Fear the wrath of Oyoshiro-sama's curse. Demolish the dam. Those involved must go away. The construction office must respond. The construction office manager must negotiate with us. Signs and banners crowded the roadside. Even reading the brush-scrawled words was daunting. It was as though the road was just changed was a border with a different country. At that moment, I was startled by the car suddenly braking. Looking ahead, a barricade had been erected. About 5 or 6 protesters wearing masks and helmets to hide their faces were blocking the road, yelling at us angrily to stop.
これは何ですか？検問？
はぁ？懲りない連中だな。
Oichi snorted as he rolled down the window and leaned out.
おいおいおい。あんたらダメだよ、こんなとこで道を塞いじゃ。
As Oichi glared at them with a malicious laugh, they visibly faltered.
道、それじゃ通れないでしょ。
Who'd have thought it was Oishi's car? That panic thought seemed to make them lose their presence of mind.
大石刑事の車と分かってればこんなご無礼はしなかったんですがね。大石刑事、いつもの車はどうされました？車検ですか？
そんなところです。台車ってのはどうにも馴染みませんね。
Judging from their brief conversation, I could guess that they were familiar with the license plate of the car Oishi normally used. In other words, if they knew the car belonged to the police, they would have hidden the barricade. What they were doing was obviously obstruction of traffic. A blatant crime.
そっちの怪しい男は誰です？あんた、顔を見せてくれませんか？
The man glared at me menacingly. Wearing a mask and sunglasses made me look particularly dubious. Would not showing my face get me in some unnecessary trouble? I turned to Oishi to see what I should do.
彼の顔は勘弁してあげてください。まだまだ新米でシャイなんですからね。
不審な輩じゃないか確認しようってだけです。最近のひなみさんは物騒ですからね。
あんたのうち鏡歪んでるのと違います？
Yeah, it seems like the people are kind of talking with him normally.
あんたのその面の方がよっぽど不審ですよ。
But maybe just because he's the police. The men and Oishi continued to talk like that, feigning smiles at one another. However, from beginning to the end, I couldn't get over the feeling I was sitting on a powder keg.
ゴミの不法投棄車両まだ減らないんですか？オタクたちも本当に朝晩大変ですね。
How long is it, do you guys think, until it's done? This segment.
警察の方にもご理解とご協力をいただけて助かりますよ。
Whose voice is this? I feel like we've heard this voice before. Probably like 10-15 minutes? Yeah, I can't stay that long, unfortunately. Okay. During that conversation, the barricade was moved, leaving a gap wide enough for a single car to get through. Oishi lightly honked the horn once and began to roll the car forward. I could see the men's antagonistic glares at the back of the car in the rearview mirror.
何ですかさっきの。
Yeah, I feel like here's a good stopping point right here. What was that just now? Okay. Right there. We will save. Tomorrow I'll see if I could stream earlier to finish up this and then do the next segment. So I'll try to stream a bit earlier, to get that all done. which I think should be possible, but we will see. Yeah. Sorry, I was kind of trying to rush through a bit to see if I could finish it, but it was not possible. But it's definitely interesting seeing a different point of view on stuff, and a look into the past with everything. It is interesting overall. But yeah, I think that'll be it from me for today. Chapter 4 is interested to see where it goes, because obviously it's dealing with the child who went missing, right? But I wonder where else it's going to go. If we will meet other characters that we've seen in... I would assume we're going to meet, like, the normal Higurashi characters. Like, Rena is not going to be there because she came a year before Keiichi. Mion I could see appearing because she's Sonozaki. I don't know if Satsuko will appear. But I feel like Rika will appear. I feel like Mion and Rika, maybe Shion, would be the ones most likely to appear. I think. But it's gonna be a young version of them. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for everyone who stopped by the stream. I appreciate it. And I will be back with more Higurashi tomorrow. Yeah. Did I save? I did save, yes. I did save. Right there. Okay. Goodbye, everyone.